Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am Robert the Narrator, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Confessions. This will be episode number 23. It will be another in my series of top 10 favorite RPGs of all time. Trying to knock this out. We are getting into the top 5 this episode because this will be game number 5 on my list. First, before we get into that, I want to say thank you to all of those fantastic folks out there, subscribers who actually care about what I have to say. We have hit the 100 mark, and I am astonished and humbled that there are even 100 people in the world who even care what I have to say about any topic. So it is fantastic. It's great to have subscribers out there, folks who want to share in this experience. Thank you very much. I hope it keeps going. Hopefully, Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master will get better and better. This episode, I'm going to talk about the number 5 game on my list. And that game is a Marvel superheroes RPG by the legendary gaming company TSR. And that game is, boom, Marvel Superhero Adventure Game. Wait a minute. Were you expecting me to say something else? I'm pretty sure you were probably expecting that if I had a Marvel superheroes role-playing game on my top 10 favorites of all time, the game that it would be the classic TSR Phase Rip system Marvel superhero game, which was the first Marvel superheroes role-playing game that TSR released 15 years before they released the Marvel Superhero Adventure game. So the Marvel Phase Rip system was first, and it was released in 1984. Now, I'm probably going to anger a couple of people. My personal opinion of Phase Rip, I played it back in the day. Some of the members of a gaming club that I was a member of many moons ago swear by Phase Rip as a supers RPG. And again, it is a classic, iconic game in the industry and in the hobby. But I've never really been a big fan of Phase Rip. And the reason for that is that it is too complicated. And now, admittedly, this is someone who started the hobby with the Champions superhero RPG game, which is definitely, in the history of our hobby, one of the most complex RPGs ever published. When I say Phase Rip is more complex, maybe what I really mean is that it's less efficient than Champions. For example, in Champions, there is one power that is a ranged attack if you want to hurt somebody at range. It's called Energy Blast. And if you want that Energy Blast to set the target on fire, or if you wanted it to pierce armor, or if you wanted it to go around the corner and hit someone that you can't see, or originate from a different location other than your current position, you can do all of that by just purchasing power modifiers. Power costs a little bit more for you to have those added special effects and benefits, and essentially you can say that the Energy Blast looks like whatever you want it to. It's an ice blast, or it's a boomerang that I throw, or whatever. And that's just more efficient. Now, with a game like Phase Rip, For that same effect that is one power, you have multiple different powers. You have ice blast and fire blast and this blast and that blast. And it's multiple paragraphs explaining what this does. So it's in that way, it's much less efficient. You have to remember so much more with phase rip. All you have to remember with champions is energy blast. I put this many points in it, it does this much damage, and it has these effects added to it, which I think is just a lot simpler. But hey, it's just my opinion, and for that reason, the game that is on my top 10 list is actually the Marvel Superheroes Adventure game, which uses TSR's Saga rule set, and also uses these fantastic cards instead of dice. So let's jump into the episode proper. What drew me to the Marvel Superhero Adventure game? Well, I remember seeing an ad for the Marvel Superhero Adventure game. Obviously, Marvel is a huge property, and kind of like Star Trek or Star Wars, when a new role-playing game comes out for such a massive property, you have to check it out. And there were two other things about it. First of all, as I have said in previous episodes, I am a sucker for a role-playing game that uses cards instead of dice. The other thing that I loved about the Marvel Superheroes Adventure game was the ad that I saw. It essentially was a photo of a D20 showing a 1 being rolled, and the caption was "damn" in big bold letters, and the ad went on to say, doesn't it suck when a pivotal moment in a game is determined by a really bad die roll. And it basically was touting the fact that the way that the Saga system rules for the Marvel Superhero Adventure games worked, it gave the player a little more control over their outcomes. So that was really neat, and as a matter of fact, I stole the idea for that ad when I was attempting to get my group to try the Marvel Superheroes Adventure game. I made my own version of that ad by photocopying a D20, came out perfectly, and it's kind of same thing, damn, and a little story about how a dragon was attacking a town, and the blacksmith's son, who wasn't a hero, picked up a beautiful sword that his father had, and he went to attack the dragon with this dragon slaying sword and jumped at the dragon and raised it, and the player rolls a crit failure, and the kid trips and drops the sword, and the dragon eats him, and the game's over and the town is destroyed. And so it was really funny, and I actually mailed my little proposal for the game or invite to the game out with my little version of the ad, and it was really fun, and I really loved that ad that promoted the game, and the idea that the Saga rules system gives the players a little bit more control over their outcomes. So I really like that. What is the Marvel Superhero Adventure game all about? It's about the superheroes in the very well-known Marvel Comics universe. You have Captain America and Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and of course these days the movie theaters are filled with different movies depicting the stories of these great characters that have been around for a very long time. And that's what the game is about. It's about the players either playing their favorite superhero from the Marvel universe, or making your own hero to fight alongside Marvel characters or in your game master's unique universe. So being a hero and being a good guy and fighting for truth and justice against supervillains and villainous organizations. That's what the Marvel superhero adventure game is all about. What are the mechanics of the Marvel superhero adventure game? The core task resolution mechanics of the game really revolve around the 4 abilities that all characters have. All characters have strength, agility, intellect, and willpower. Each of these abilities will have what's called an intensity. It's basically a number from 3, which is normal human average, to 10, which is normal human maximum capability, all the way up to 20, which is godlike. For instance, Spider-Man has a 14 agility. Captain America has a 10 strength. The Incredible Hulk has a 20 strength. So that gives you an idea of the ranges and what the different intensity levels of the ability scores really mean. Now, the 96 card Fate deck that comes with the game, when the game was released, it was released in a little box set which came with the game book, a roster book that has a bunch of heroes and villains in it, and the 96 card Fate deck. So the core task resolution mechanic, of course, heavily involves the 96 card Fate deck, and there are 5 suits that are, at least 4 of them are related to the 4 ability scores. So you have a strength suit, which is green and depicts the Incredible Hulk. You have an agility suit, which is red and has Spider-Man depicted on it. You have an intellect suit, which is blue and has Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, depicted on it. And then you have a willpower suit, which is purple and has Doctor Strange depicted on it. Now, the 5th suit that comes with the deck is the Doom suit and isn't related to any of the other abilities, and as you may or may not be able to see, has Doctor Doom pictured on it. And I'll talk about the Doom suit a little bit later. So you have 5 suits, and in the deck you have cards with numeric values from 1 to 10. The only 10 I've seen in the deck is a Doom suit card. Every other suit seems to go from 1 to 9, and there are a couple of duplicated numeric values. What I'll do now is I will tell you how the core task resolution mechanic works. If a character wanted to do something and was going up against an obstacle that did not include an NPC or supervillain, the narrator should come up with a difficulty level for the task. Now, difficulty levels, there are 11 difficulty levels, from automatic, which is difficulty rating 0, to impossible, which is difficulty rating 40. You have easy is a 4, average is an 8, challenging is a 12, daunting is a 16, desperate is a 20, superhuman is a 24, unfathomable is a 28, cosmic is 32, godlike is 36, impossible is 40. The narrator would determine the difficulty level of what the player was attempting to do, and also which ability score would be most appropriate. Let's say Captain America was attempting to leap off of a 2-story building and land on a speeding automobile. That would, of course, be an agility action. Captain America has an intensity rating of 10 for his agility, which is the peak of human capability. And let's say that the difficulty level is a superhuman task. So difficulty rating 24. Now, during the game, player characters have another trait called hand size. During the game, you maintain a hand of cards from the Fate deck equal to your hand size. Captain America has a hand size of 4. With the task resolution, what a character is allowed to do is to play 1 card from their hand. They add the numeric value of the card to the intensity of the ability score that they're using. Captain America's agility is 10. If you can only play 1 card, there is no way that Captain America would ever be able to perform a superhuman task. However, there are some ways around that 1 card per turn rule, and that rule is called edge. Edge is another trait on a character sheet. Captain America has an edge of 4. What that means is if you play a card from your hand that has a value lower than the character's edge, you can continue to play cards from your hand until you play a card that is over the character's edge. I'm going to illustrate that right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play a 1 of intellect from my hand. That gives me an 11. Then I'm going to play a 3 of agility. So that is still under Captain America's edge, so I can continue to play cards. And then the last card I'm going to play is a 6 of agility. So I played a 1, a 3, and a 6. That's 10. Added to Captain America's agility, that gives me a 20. So right now, I'm still failing the task because I need a 24. The other rule that gets around the only 1 card per turn rule is what is called going trump. If the last card that you play from your hand for an action matches the ability that you're using, what you can do is take the top card off of the deck and play it. So I've done that, and that was a 5 of agility, and you continue to go trump. And now I have a 5 of intellect. That is 10, 16, 19, 20, plus Captain America's agility of 10 gets me a 30. He leaps off of the 2-story building, lands exactly where he wants to land on the speeding vehicle, and can continue to fight the bad guys. After you have played all of the cards that you can play for an action, and you have played all of the cards that you can play from your trump, you then go back up to your hand size. That is the core task resolution mechanic when a character is taking an action that does not involve a bad guy. Let's talk about how a player character would deal with a bad guy. When a player character has to go up against a bad guy, it is always an opposed action. At the beginning of any exchange, when a player character is going to perform an opposed action against an NPC, the first thing that a narrator must do is place the narrator card face up on the table. What that entails is the narrator taking the top card of the deck. What I flipped up was a 4 of Doom. The narrator doesn't have a handful of cards that he uses for the bad guys. The bad guys have their own ability scores, and they also use the narrator card. Let's say Captain America was attempting to punch Dr. Doom. Just punching another character would be an easy task. That is difficulty rating 4. Dr. Doom has an agility of 6, that is 10, plus the value of the narrator card, that's another 4 right now, so that is 14. What the game recommends is that the narrator never tell a player what their target number is. After playing for a little while, players will generally get a feeling for how difficult things are. They don't always have to swing for the fences, but you kind of get a good feeling of what you have to play from your hand in order to be successful. Though the player playing Captain America would not know that they needed a 14, they would have to just go for it and hope for the best. I have Captain America's card right here. Captain America has a strength of 10, and he has boxing as a skill. What skills do is reduce the difficulty rating of an action by 1. Instead of being a 4, which is easy, it would be a 0. Captain America would only need a 10 to successfully hit Dr. Doom. He's already at a 10, but the player, of course, doesn't know that. What he is going to do is he is going to go ahead and play a 4 of strength and stop right there. Now, since it is a strength task, punching Dr. Doom is a strength task, and the last card played for the action is the strength suit, what you do is you take the top card of the deck. Oh my goodness, it's a 5 of strength, so you keep going. Oh my god, it's an 8 of strength and a 4 of agility. So it gets really exciting. I've played the game before, of course, and it gets really exciting when you play a card, you go trump, and you get that top card, and you just get an amazing play like this. Captain America has 10, 14, 22, 27, 31. He has hit Dr. Doom with a 31. The way that you do damage is you total up your successful attack, which is a 31. You subtract the target's strength plus any armor that they may have. Dr. Doom has a 14 strength. That 31 is reduced by 14. That leaves 16 points of damage Captain America has done to Dr. Doom. And NPCs have a health total. Dr. Doom has a 40 health. So you would remove 16 from that. When an NPC gets to 0 health, they are knocked out of the combat. With the characters, they have a hand size and a health. The hand size is if the character is being played as a player character, of course, and the health is there if the character is being played as an NPC. That is how an attack works. The player is finished playing cards, this goes to the discard pile, and he refills his hand back up to his hand size. Now the Doom suit. If you look here, I have randomly drawn a ton of Doom cards. I have 7, 7, and 2. Captain America, this was Captain America, he has 16 points in Doom cards. So I'll tell you about the Doom cards now. First of all, Doom cards never go trump. And whenever a player character plays a Doom card from their hand, once the action is over, the narrator gets all of the Doom cards that were played by a player. And those cards go to the Doom pool. The card is taken, placed face up on the table in front of the narrator in the Doom pool. And at any point, the narrator can take those cards and add them to an action against a player character. Every Doom card added to an action reduces the player character's action total by that amount. In that example of Captain America getting a 31, if the narrator actually had these 16 points of Doom cards in his Doom pool, he could take those cards and add all, and that would lower the total by 16. This is a mechanic that is very similar to the GM intrusion mechanic from Narraider, which was the last game that I talked about from my list of top 10 favorite RPGs of all time. But unlike GM intrusions, the Doom pool makes me a little bit uneasy, and I'll tell you why. With GM intrusions, a GM can at any point say, hey, player character, something has gone wrong. You've slipped, you've dropped something, the bad guy has gotten a drop on you, something else in the environment goes against you. And it does make the player character's life more difficult, but it also makes the story more interesting. And on top of that, for making the player character's life more difficult, at least the player gets experience points from the GM intrusion. I don't feel bad when I do GM intrusions in Numenera for those reasons, but in the Marvel Superheroes adventure game, using cards from the Doom pool makes me feel like I'm picking on the characters. They don't get anything from it other than the fact that those cards are no longer around. I guess it's kind of mitigated because what the rules say, any cards that go to the Doom pool during a particular conflict should be used before the conflict is over. And I believe the rules may say that they should possibly be used against the character who played them. I'm not absolutely certain about that, but it still makes me feel bad about using them. And that's something that I have never really gotten over when it comes to the Doom pool mechanic in the Marvel Superheroes adventure game. The couple of other aspects I want to talk about when it comes to the Fate deck. As I mentioned, NPC characters, the narrator doesn't maintain a hand for each NPC in the game. However, each PC, of course, has a handful of cards based on their hand size for their character. The way damage works for player characters is instead of having a number of health that gets reduced from the damage they take, they actually have to discard cards from their hand equal to the value of the damage that they're taking. In that circumstance, where Dr. Doom was taking 16 points of damage Let's flip and say that Captain America was taking 16 points of damage. So he has 12 total with his chainmail body armor plus 2, so he has 12 total points of strength. When you take damage, the target subtracts his strength and then takes the rest of the remaining damage. So from that 16, Captain America would take 4 points of damage. What a player character would have to do is they would have to look at their hand and discard a number of cards with a value equal to or greater than the number of damage that they are taking. So what I'm going to do is I basically have 3 7s and a 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and discard this 7 of doom to pay for the 4 damage that I'm taking. Now, the way that damage works is, unlike when you're doing an action, after you finish playing all of the cards for your action, you refill your hand up to your hand size. However, when you're taking damage, any cards that you remove from your hand to pay for damage do not get redrawn until you get a recovery. Now, Captain America has been hurt, and he only has 3 cards in his hand from damage. And right now, I'll tell you, speaking of damage, I'll tell you how a player recovers. In the upper left-hand corner, you have the numeric value of the card. You have the picture for the suit. And then right here, you may notice this little minus sign. This area right here is what's called an aura reading. Each card has it, and there are 3 types of auras in the game. You have a negative aura with the minus right there, and that is in a black square. You have a positive aura on some cards, and it's a white square with a little plus sign right there. Or you have a neutral aura, and that's in a red square, and you have basically a little dot there. So there are several ways that the aura is used. One of them is for recovery. At the beginning of each round of a conflict, the first thing that the narrator does is takes the top card of the deck, place it in front of him. What it does is it lets you know who, if anyone, gets a recovery. When the narrator card is positive, the good guys recover. So in that situation where Captain America was down to a 3 hand size because of damage, he would automatically go ahead and draw a card, and that puts him back to full hand size. If the narrator card's aura is negative, then the bad guys recover health equal to the value of the negative card. If the aura is neutral, no one recovers. The other ways that aura are used in the game is if the narrator is facing a situation where the core task resolution mechanic really can't address it. For example, if Spider-Man had to web sling across town and stop a bomb from exploding, the web slinging power doesn't tell you how fast Spider-Man can move. So there really isn't a good resolution for how quickly he can get there. Can he get there in time to save the day? The narrator can just flip the top card of the deck and take an aura reading. So the card that I flipped up is a 7 of strength. It has a positive aura reading, so that means Spider-Man gets there in time. The other way that aura readings can be used is if you have abilities that have a duration. On a negative aura reading, the duration ends, or if you have something that is on a timer, a positive aura reading means that the time elapses and the power goes off. So those are ways that you use the aura readings. And the last thing that I will tell you about the Fate deck and the cards is the other portion that we haven't looked at is up in the upper right hand corner of the card. You have what's called an event and a calling. Each character has a calling. A calling is basically the thing that drives the character in the game. For instance, Captain America's calling is idealist. Doctor Doom's calling is world domination. When you're playing the game, if the game master ever wants to spice the game up or make things more interesting, or at a pivotal point in a particular session, for instance, the good guys defeat the bad guys, or the bad guys defeat the good guys, or the narrator just wants something interesting to occur, what you can do is you can flip up top card of the deck and take a look. This card says hero worship. That is the event, and the calling is exemplar. Essentially what this means is if the game master can come up with an interesting way as to how the hero worship event could shake things up in the current exchange or the current scene, they can go ahead and narratively describe how that event affects what is currently going on. And the calling on the card is a way for player characters to get what's called a reaction bonus. For some reason, the hero worship event should pull at a character who has the exemplar calling. So whatever the event is should cause an exemplar character to jump into action. If they do so, when experience points are given out, they get what's called a reaction bonus. So they get a little bit of a bonus for responding to something that speaks to the character's drive or calling. A couple of the other events, Glimmer of Compassion is another event that should appeal to a character who has an animal nature. Soul Searching is for a character who feels a repentant calling. I can see a lot of the ways that these events could spice up a particular scene, like Unstable Ground. I could see how I could make that work with a scene. Mass Panic, Help from Above, Energy Flux. I could think of a lot of cool ways to spice up the game with those events. It really gets your imagination going. I love the event mechanic of the game. So I think the last thing that I'm going to discuss is character creation. Going to touch on it really briefly. And the Fate deck is used for character creation. When you are creating a character, a player should draw 10 cards. It's a random process, of course, but the character wants to make sure that they have a variety of suits and good high values from the cards that they draw. The ability scores: strength, intellect, agility, and willpower. You can assign up to 3 cards to each ability. The total value of the cards played for each ability gives a score for that ability. A hero has to have a minimum value of 2 in each ability score and up to a maximum of 20. If you're creating an inexperienced hero, only 1 ability score can exceed a value of 10. If you're creating an experienced hero, only 1 ability score can exceed 12. Now, if you look at a character, you notice that each ability score has a numeric value and a letter: A, B, C, D, Those are called ability codes. You have ability codes A, B, C, D, and X. What that denotes is how many skills related to that ability the character can have. You look at the cards you've assigned to each ability score. If you have played any Doom cards for an ability, assign that ability an X code. If you have played no Doom cards and also have no cards of the ability's suit, assign a D code. If you have one card of the ability's suit, you give it a C code. If you have two cards, you give it a B code. If you have three cards assigned to the ability, it has an A code. An A code means the character can have 4 skills for that ability. A B code means 3 skills. A C code means 2 skills. A D code means 1 skill. And a code of X means you can't have any skills for that ability. Edge and hand size. All characters start out with an edge of 1 and a hand size of 3. To get a +1 to both hand size and edge, you must place a non-Doom card of value 7 or more. For that purpose, a player-created hero cannot have a hand size of higher than 5. And then powers and equipment you purchase using your remaining cards. The value on the cards that you assign to a particular power gives you that power's intensity. And one other thing I'll mention is when you use a power, for instance, if you were going to use Energy Blast, when you try to Energy Blast someone, the intensity of your Energy Blast is actually what you use for your attack, not agility. And of course, each power in the game, Energy Blast, Empathy, Energy Conversion, Electricity Control, each of those are related to a particular ability. When you have to decide if you are going trump or not when you attack with a particular power, that is determined by what ability the power is related to, but you use the numeric value or intensity of the power to make the attack. And then the last couple of steps of creating the characters, you can assign limitations to your powers. Your character can have hindrances, and of course you assign your character a calling. And that is how you make a character. To sum everything up, I still love the Marvel superhero adventure game. Of course, it's no longer in print. It's long since out of print. There have been multiple Marvel RPGs released since the Marvel superhero adventure game was released. But the game is so colorful. It's so fun. It's so different. It is my rules light to low level rules medium go-to superhero system. I love the fact that players have much more control over the success of their actions. It gets really exciting when you're going trump and you just seeing the cards stack up and that action total is getting higher and higher. So it's just a really great game. It is so much fun. I would still play the Marvel superhero adventure game even today, and I just love it. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button below and you'll get notifications when I put up another episode. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are.